Hello, everyone. Today I'm looking at Quake 4. This is a really weird installment, and frankly, I find the whole Quake series to be just very strange, like super odd. Not exactly for its tone, but its inconsistency with its games and its game design. The first Quake was almost a pseudo medieval quest to kill, these Lovecraftian, fleshy armorish creatures. Like the idea of, I think the main theme that does run through all the games is this combination of flesh and metal combining to create some, superhuman race of, beings. And Quake 1, there's really no story. It's very similar to Doom. You're just some guy and you got to go kill the thing. It's very straightforward. Quake 2 introduces this whole campaign in space, and you're just some random marine. And suddenly, I feel like, again, I felt like there's some story I missed, and suddenly you're just invading this place, and you got to just do it and go along with the story. And then Quake 3, they threw all that out and saying, well, it's just an arena shooter. It's just a purely multiplayer game. I've never been so confused by one series where every game feels like a different game entirely in this series. But Quake 4 is the one game that does feel most consistently similar to Quake 2. It feels like an actual sequel to Quake 2. It feels like, oh, this is a single player, mainly focused campaign with a bunch of objectives, voice acting, dynamic lighting or stark lighting. And I guess on that, the lighting immediately tipped me off that oh, this is Doom 3. This is the Doom 3 engine. And funnily enough, in the credits they do credit saying, oh, this was made using the Doom 3 engine. And yeah, I can tell, and that's not necessarily a good thing. As we all know, Doom 3 is just catastrophically bad. But I will say that Quake 4, at least in comparison to Doom 3, in terms of actual gameplay, is actually just a little bit better. I mean, it's definitely, not amazing by any means. It still has that weird, clunkiness. I don't know. One thing that really defines Quake or Doom 3 as an engine to me is the fact that enemies will blow up and then just disappear, or ships will just end up disappearing and then having particle effects. It just feels so rough of an engine. It feels so, I don't know, almost archaic in a certain way. And it's such a weird, time for it to kind of fall from grace as their FPS roots in this literal dark ages. Because everything in this game is super dark. There are certain areas where you almost need to use your flashlight, and the weird thing is the flashlight is only attached to your pistol and your basic machine gun, which honestly is very effective. I mean, it's not as powerful as the other weapons you get later on in the game, but its magazine is massive. At least after the tutorial level, it becomes 70 or something bullets, and you can take out multiple enemies and just not reload. It's a very strange, interesting thing. But yeah, Quake 4 is just, I don't know. It definitely looks like Doom 3. The one good thing though is that unlike Doom 3, the shotgun is actually decently satisfying to use in this game. You'll see enemies react to it. They'll kind of go flying, kind of ragdolling a little bit, and then they end up disappearing in this green thing particle effect. The one thing kind of put me off in the first level is there was backtracking in it, which just feels like a super lazy thing to have, especially in your first level. To have backtracking in FPS feels very unconventional and very strange. These levels are supposed to be kind of pushed through as a Sonic game. You kind of go through and you don't ever look back unless you're doing some kind of weird centripetal or centrifugal puzzle or something, right? But yeah, in terms of gameplay, nothing really much has changed from the past Quake games. You have all the returning weapons plus some new ones. Everything's a little bit more HD now. Obviously, some new weapons in this game that I don't think were in the previous games were the dark matter gun. That's really cool. It's basically this black hole bullet thing, which is really nifty, and it swoops all the enemies up in it, and basically is a huge AOE style attack. Aside from that, there's also, of course, the famous lightning gun returns. There's also the beam sniper thing. The hyper gun or something, which is just another machine gun. And then you have the nail gun, which is now a lock-on thing if you zoom in. So that's new. Also, your main rifle in this game, if you zoom in, it'll switch to only semi-automatic, and it'll let you basically, shoot enemies from afar. But it automatically switches to semi-auto. The other thing I noticed that was really interesting as a mechanic in the weapons is that throughout the game, your weapons will actually upgrade for free. And this reminds me a lot of Doom Eternal, where you could upgrade or even Doom 2016, where you could upgrade your special attachment for your rifle to be like a semi-auto fire or like having missiles in it. And so it's really funny because throughout the course of the campaign, you'll get these upgrades, but it'll be through like random Marines sometimes. They'll be like, oh, hey, I know we're doing the final assault, but by the way, I can upgrade your lightning gun so it does chain lightning now. No problem, bro. Just like, I just need to do that for you. So it's kind of a little bit funny or cheesy that just happens throughout the campaign, that you just get these upgrades for free. You don't even need to find anything. It just happens naturally. I think a really cool one is that the shotgun goes from, basically pump. Well, it's still pump action, but then it changes to like having a cartridge, so you reload it all at once. The lightning gun gets chain lightning. And I think I think it's the damage output for the sniper beam rifle that basically can go through multiple enemies now, which is super rare, but it's appreciated, I guess. There's also some vehicle sections in this game, so you like get on a little, vehicle thing, get on the turret, shoot all the guys, everything explodes. There's another one where you actually have a controllable vehicle, which is kind of fun/frustrating. But yeah, again, because this is on the Doom 3 engine, everything just feels so just rough, so very kind of semi broken and archaic, and just not, it doesn't feel good to shoot. I mean, it doesn't feel as bad as Doom 3, but again, it's just overall it feels kind of okay-ish, Also, the enemy variety, I mean, there is some enemy variety. Actually, there's quite a lot of enemy variety, but it doesn't really matter. You're just wailing on them with as much firepower as you have. Oh yeah, you also have, grenade launcher, and yeah, you upgrade your rocket launcher to have like a triple shot. That's what I immediately thought of Doom. It's like, oh, that is like literally the exact same thing. I think it's funny though that in the Doom universe, Doom guy is this super intimidating guy that all the NPCs run away from, and when you're Quake guy, all your NPCs are like friendly and happy to see you and keep giving you different kinds of weapons and upgrades and stuff. As far as I understand, this is the last Quake game, unless I think there's Quake Champions or something, but this was the last mainline title they made before they kind of threw in the towel, I guess. But it's really interesting to see how this game might have evolved into Doom and maybe Wolfenstein and those other games, because there's a lot of DNA in this one. I guess just talking about the enemy design, I guess the one thing I do really appreciate about this game is the aesthetic value of a lot of the enemy design, character design. There's a lot of the NPCs are voiced, and they have these little kind of scripted sequences, which, funnily enough, I if you want, you can just walk past them and you'll completely like ignore them and go to the next sequence if you're just focused on gameplay. And again, the story isn't really anything important or interesting. It's like there are aliens called the Strogg, or the Strogg, and they are kind of like a hybrid of flesh and machine. And I feel that whole aesthetic is really captivated in this game. There are certain parts where it tries to be like a horror themed thing, like Doom, but I don't feel it really hits the mark. But I think the aesthetic ideas of Doom 3 and Quake 4, I really like them because they are like decently extremely dark. And I've only seen this really in games like Soma, but in Quake 4 you have this real marriage of flesh and machine, in the sense that you'll find these certain areas where someone's body has been cut off into pieces and is combined with like even the architecture of the alien craft of the metal, and it's still wriggling and moving, and that's really really unnerving. It's the idea that the materials that you are composed of become the materials of the environment, and where flesh and machine, it's not like this big messy thing like Dead Space where there's like flesh growing on the life of the walls. It's like the machine and the flesh become one. And then there's these certain enemy types where they have this thing called, I forget what it's called, Soylent. I want to think it's like Soylent Green or something, but it's this green liquid that essentially the Stork use to heal themselves. And you have this giant like fat Java pug-like creature that is basically gorging itself on this stuff, which I think is made from humans or flesh or something. And basically, it is the life force that the Stork used to heal themselves. And so you actually end up doing this little puzzle mini game, similar kind of Half-Life when you have like that giant tentacle thing, and you basically get to a control button and you basically overfeed it on the Soylent whatever until it bursts its stomach, which is kind of fun. There are like a couple like decent weird puzzles here and there, despite this being mostly shooting. Something else I wanted also to mention about the NPCs that was also really nifty and cool is that you have a lot of incentive to keep them around. I'm not sure if they can actually really die, because some of them that are medics or specialists can basically, if you stand by them and don't even say anything, they will start healing you. And, obviously the medic do health, but the specialists heal your armor, which I thought was really, really cool. So it feels more like a squad-based kind of shooter thing, but I don't know. I'd like to see maybe more, aspects from, maybe offensive capabilities from certain, allies. Maybe they can like lay down covering fire or have some kind of heavy weapon that only they can use and you put them in position. But I kind of felt there was more substance to the NPC. Usually your support fire NPCs in most shooters are just totally useless and they don't really do anything and they're just there for a set piece. But here they actually do kill quite a few enemies. If you just leave them alone with the enemy, they can actually pretty much take them out by themselves if you don't decide to engage. And yeah, they're super helpful for healing, which was very surprising. I guess I should probably mention this, that what this game is known for is actually one very iconic scene that I think I watched before I even played it years ago, just on YouTube. And it's the Storkification cutscene. And again, this game has a few cutscenes here and there, usually people going, and dying, the typical stuff. But there's one sequence that is honestly horrifying that I think encapsulates the aesthetic that this game is trying to go for, which is that you end up getting captured and you get up being transformed into one of the Storgs. And, you kind of implicitly know that, someone's going to jump in and save you and stop the process and stop people from being converted. But, like, the process goes on for a pretty long time before they actually interrupt it and quote-unquote save you. But by that point, this horrible cutscene plays out where, you're on this conveyor belt and you're basically having your limbs chopped off and reattached with mechanical ones. And then, kind of being lobotomized and injected with all of this weird Soylent Green stuff and turned, in cybernetics and basically being tortured and rewritten into this, soldier zombie thing. And it's really, kind of, it is graphic, but even the idea behind what it represents is also very graphic because it's basically completely dehumanizing. And so the cool thing is that, they come in, they quote unquote, save you. But in the process of, doing that, they save you just from the very brink. So at this point, you're mostly Storg. You are basically mostly machine at this point. You have like little evil eyes. You look like the villain of the game basically, and your whole helmet is cybernetics. You have like veins popping out. You kind of almost look like you'd be better off dead. And there's a lot of people who don't trust you when you come back to basically, you look like a Storg, cyborg guy. And it's really kind of horrifying. And so I feel like they could have done something maybe more with that, but what was really, really, really cool that I liked that what they did in this game is that once you become Storg and the Storkification process occurs, suddenly all of the alien text that kind of looks like that Star Wars text, so that's very angular and triangular and whatever, suddenly it all becomes this triangular font that you can actually read now, and all the alien monitors now are displayed in English, and you can read them and interface with them. And what's even cooler that I thought was so neat, because I saw this thing where you have these healing stations where it's like a human heart pumping out this Soylent Green stuff in the walls, and it looks like an interactable thing, but you can't use it until the halfway point when you become Storg. And you basically are able to interact with these things, and they act as healing stations, while previously they were just set pieces. And I think that is actually so cool. So by becoming like part of the enemy or having the enemy's technology, suddenly not only could you read everything, but you can start interacting with it. while still remaining, your semblance of humanity. I thought that was just super super cool. I honestly kind of thought for a moment you were actually going to fight for the story because like you got so far into the process and looked so much the part. It almost wouldn't surprise me if you started fighting the Marines almost. But no, that doesn't happen. You just be like, okay, you're almost 99% evil or converted at this point, but you just have that 1% of yourself left that you're like, yeah, okay, I'll keep fighting and helping the UAC, whatever these guys are. But again, I really like. I just on that point, just not the fact that you can read the font, but I do think my favorite thing of Doom 3 and this game are the designs of the interfaces. They are so well done. Like whoever did, I mean, of all the things to say about a game that really is overall terrible, like Doom 3, the interfaces do deserve a lot of credit and love because they're so cool to look at, and you definitely see that throughout Doom 2016 and Doom Eternal. They're just made so well. And the other thing too is that these interfaces, the fact that you just have your cursor fall over them and immediately turns into an interface, you don't have to press a button to like enter the computer screen. It just automatically in world enters into that mode, which I just thought was super super cool. And those interfaces are the same ones, and they work more or less the same way as Doom Eternal. But what I really like is that you can enter the screen with your cursor, and it won't immediately like hover over the thing you need to press. Like the whole screen is not one giant button. You actually need to navigate on the screen to the button you have to press. So it feels super immersive. I really like it. And again, despite the Doom 3 engine being kind of clunky and whatever, I think the lighting and the heavy shadows is something I really miss from this era of gaming before everything became saturated with disgusting bloom. I think I like to think someone made a wish like, oh, I wish I never saw dark shadows again, and now we have nothing but heavy bloom where everything is based on LCD screens, and that because of that everything has a lightened background and everything looks just lighter in general, and it's really aggravating. But I really like the aesthetic, the heavy shadows of Doom. It really makes for a proper horror military shooter. Again, the voice acting is good. The gameplay is decent and it gets you through. There's never a point where I feel like there's certain points in the game where you have to use a certain weapon, or like this is the sniper area, or this is whatever area. A lot of the areas feel very much the same. Like here's a bunch of hallways, here's a bunch of corridors, shoot, 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 and nothing really changes. And yeah, you kind of, do your shooting, meet a bunch of NPCs, they talk to you, they give, health and ammo, they give you a new objective, you do that. Cutscene might play, and then you get to the end of the level, and it ends there and automatically saves and loads the next one. I do have to admit, though, the animations on the characters' faces are really impressive in this game. Something I think maybe a lot of people might not appreciate, but when you look at, again, I don't think it's like Mass Effect Andromeda, or even other games from this era, the animation on the faces are really top notch, honestly. But again, the dialogue, the story isn't really anything important. There aren't any characters that like stand out in this game. Like there's a few lieutenants and corporals that like whatever, but none of them have memorable dialogue. None of them have an interesting arc or anything. They are just they have some flavor to them, but nothing that you're going to remember them for. And yeah, there's not much else, unfortunately, I can really say about this game. I do think, though, I should bring up the ending. The ending was kind of dumb. I mean, the final boss, it took me like it took me almost 30 minutes to realize that the way you have to actually, I thought it was like a horde wave, like you have a boss, and the boss comes back again, and then you have a third kind of boss while there's a bunch of enemies attacking you. And it took me a while to realize, oh, you have to shoot the thing at the top of its head in order to disable the shields, and then you can damage it. It took me a while to figure that out, because I'm like, what do I do? I thought if I killed enough enemies, the shield would drop, but no, you're supposed to shoot this thing at the very top of it. But anyway, once I figured that out, I was like, oh, all right. But then after that, it's kind of like you defeated the Nexus. This was, the place where all the communications were coming from, and that was like their main goal, to defeat the story. They took out their communication system, so you take out the mainframe, and then you kind of like meet your buddies. And they're like, hey, look, it's Kane or whatever your name is, and you're like, oh, he's almost Storg now, but he's the guy, And what I love is that you're a silent protagonist. So all the while they have this guy who's standing there who looks like an absolute, cybernetic psychopath. They're all joking and laughing and, jostling him. Meanwhile, he's a stone cold stare on his face saying nothing. It's like he's ready or premeditating or pre-planning to like murder all of them. And then the way it ends is like a typical cheesy ending where, the general's like, "Oh, but Kane just got back. Are you sure? Are you sure, sir?" And he basically like, "Sorry, Kane, but looks like you have new orders." And I thought, oh, so that wasn't the end of the game. There's actually a little bit more. There's another half of the campaign, but then the credits roll. I'm like, oh, okay, that was the end of the game. So you just added that extra scene. Maybe they were out of development time. They were going to do something else. I mean, it just feel kind of anticlimactic to end the game on taking out a communication beacon. It just seems really kind of lame, honestly. But it was decently sized. It has a decent-ish campaign, and it exists, I suppose. But overall, I think what really Quake brings to the table, or Quake 4 brings to the table, is its aesthetic and its style, and not much else. This kind of feels like a weird entry as, the fourth game in a series of games that doesn't really know what its identity is. It's such a weird thing because Doom very much knew what its identity is, and Quake doesn't seem to know what it is. I mean, Quake's gameplay at least used to be very iconic, especially with Quake 3, is highly, highly addictive as the arena shooter. And, they just didn't know, I guess, where to go. It's kind of like a half-baked vision or half-baked dream or something, and it just kind of, at the end of the day, it's a very okay experience. It's like, that was kind of nifty, I guess. But if you'd never play this game, you're not missing anything side of that. Anyway, guys, I think that's all I really have to say about it. Not much, not a huge thing here to talk about. But yeah, that's it. I'll see you later.